One evil person on their own can wreak havoc and cause unimaginable suffering. However, when two twisted individuals team up, the results are even more chilling. Just what drives a husband or wife to join their partner in committing brutal murders instead of giving them up to the police? Criminal couples seem to have a unique ability to capture the public imagination, and names such as Bonnie and Clyde are often given an almost romantic nostalgia. However, the reality is usually anything but a fairy tale. Here are my choices for 5 of the most evil couples of all time. Number 5. Myra Hindley and Ian Brady. The Moors murders have become known as some of the most abhorrent crimes in British history, and Myra Hindley and Ian Brady are names that are now synonymous with evil. Between July 1963 and October 1965, 5 children between the ages of 10 and 17 were murdered by the twisted couple, many of whom were tortured and assaulted before being killed by having their throats slit or being strangled with a wire before being buried in the bleak wilderness of Saddleworth Moor, just outside Manchester. Hindley and Brady both had troubled upbringings, with Hindley being encouraged to solve problems with violence at an early age by her strict ex-soldier father, and Brady spending his youth in and out of prison for petty crimes, as well as allegedly developing a taste for torturing animals. The couple first met in the office where they worked, with Hindley soon becoming fascinated and obsessed with Brady, and it was later revealed that they would often spend their lunch breaks reading aloud to each other accounts of Nazi atrocities committed during World War II, and they were known to be regulars at the local library where the books they borrowed tended to focus on crime and torture. Their killing spree began in July 1963, when Brady confided in Hindley his desire to commit the perfect murder. They soon set out to hunt for their first victim, Hindley driving a van, while Brady followed behind on a motorcycle. The plan was that once he spotted a potential victim, he would flash his headlights, which Hindley would take as a signal to stop and offer the person a lift. That unfortunate person was Pauline Reed, who was a friend of Hindley's younger sister. Brady flashed his lights, and Hindley stopped the van to offer Pauline a lift. The young girl got into the van, and Hindley asked her if she would mind helping her find an expensive glove that she lost on Saddleworth Moor. Pauline agreed and was taken to the moor where Brady was waiting, where he killed her by cutting her throat with a knife. 3 more victims would follow, each lured into the van by the outwardly innocent appearance of Myra Hindley, before being taken to the moor where they were abused and killed by Ian Brady. 12-year-old John Kilbride was abducted on the evening of the 23rd of November 1963 using the lost glove trick and was assaulted and strangled. 12-year-old Keith Bennett was tricked into helping Hindley load some boxes into her mini pickup and was again lured to the moor under the pretext of searching for the lost glove before being assaulted and strangled with a piece of string and buried. 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey was taken on the 26th of December 1964 at a local fairground after Hindley asked her to help carry back some shopping bags to the car and then into her house. Inside the house she was photographed and strangled with a piece of string before being buried on the moor. The couple's 5th victim would prove their undoing, however. On the 6th of October 1965, Brady invited 17-year-old Edward Evans to his home before beating him with the flat of an axe. The savage attack was witnessed by Hindley's 17-year-old brother-in-law, David Smith. The exact events that transpired within the house, including whether or not Smith was involved in the murder, are disputed. However, the 17-year-old informed the police a few hours later, first leading to the arrest of Ian Brady, and later also Myra Hindley. On the 15th of October, a suitcase was found containing photographs of Leslie Ann Downey, and a 16-minute tape recording of her screaming and pleading for help would assist in the pair's conviction after being played to a horrified court. On May 6, 1966, Brady was found guilty of 3 murders and Hindley was found guilty of 2, receiving a life sentence for each murder they were convicted of. Myra Hindley died in prison in 2002, while Brady still languishes in Ashworth Mental Hospital to this day. Number 4. Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck. Known as the Lonely Hearts Killers due to their tactic of using Lonely Hearts adverts to lure and subsequently rob and murder their victims, Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck are believed to have killed as many as 20 women between 1947 and 1949. After serving in British intelligence during World War II, Raymond Fernandez decided to head to America to seek his fortune. However, shortly after boarding a ship bound for the United States, a steel hatch fell onto his head, fracturing his skull and damaging his frontal lobe. This terrible injury is believed to have affected his behaviour and may provide some explanation as to his later unusual and murderous ways. During a later stretch in prison, he became interested in voodoo and black magic, believing that this gave him irresistible power and charm over women. He decided to put these newfound powers to use, and began answering adverts placed in local newspapers by women seeking a romantic partner. He preyed on their vulnerabilities and loneliness, winning their trust before robbing them of everything they had and moving on to a fresh victim. One of the ads he responded to was that of Martha Beck, a troubled woman who had reportedly suffered sexual abuse at the hands of her brother in her childhood. In adult life, she had begun a career as an undertaker's assistant, preparing bodies for burial before moving to California and becoming a nurse. She eventually gave birth to 2 children by 2 different men and was eventually left unemployed and a single mother. Depressed by her current situation, she escaped into a fantasy world of romance novels and movies before finally attempting to find true love in the Lonely Hearts section of the local newspaper. Fernandez had originally intended to steal from Beck, just as he had done to all his previous victims. However, the couple fell in love, and Fernandez eventually confessed his criminal deeds to his new lover. Rather than be repelled by this confession, Beck actually seemed to be excited by his criminal past and agreed to team up with him and join in his criminal enterprise, even abandoning her 2 children to the Salvation Army so that she could be with him without interruption. Her role in the scam was to act as the sister of Fernandez, giving potential victims a false sense of security due to the presence of another woman in the house, making luring them in even easier. Feeling secure at the presence of the fake sister, women would often agree to stay overnight in the house, but Beck was extremely jealous and prone to bouts of violent rage at the thought of her lover with another woman. These angry episodes would often translate into Beck attacking the woman, and it seems as though somewhere along the way, the couple began not only robbing their victims, but also killing them. It was the events of 1949 that would see their downfall. 66-year-old Janet Fay became engaged to Fernandez and went to stay with him at his New York apartment. Catching the 2 in bed, Beck flew into a rage, smashing Fay's head with a hammer before Fernandez strangled her. They buried the body in the cellar of Fernandez's sister's rented house in Queens, but Fay's family became suspicious after her disappearance, and the Lonely Hearts killers were forced to flee to Michigan. It was here that they met a young widow named Delphine Downing, where they eventually drugged and shot her before drowning her 2-year-old daughter. They buried the bodies in the basement of the house. However, suspicious neighbours alerted police, who arrested the couple on March 1st, 1949. Fernandez soon confessed, believing that doing so might save the couple from being extradited to New York, which had the death penalty. This plan failed, however, and the pair were sent to New York, where they were convicted of the murder of Janet Fay before being executed via electric chair on March 8, 1951. This was the only murder they were convicted of, but it's thought that they may have killed as many as 20 women, but the true number of victims is likely to remain unknown. Number 3. Ray and Fay Copeland. The Copelands secured their place in the history books by becoming the oldest couple ever to be sentenced to death in US history at the ripe old ages of 76 and 69 after they were convicted of the murder of 5 men. Ray and Fay Copeland lived a seemingly quiet life, spending most of their time on a humble farm in rural Missouri, and to outsiders they appeared no different to any other elderly couple trying to get by in life. However, they were hiding a dark and murderous secret. Ray Copeland was no stranger to crime. As a child, he moved from town to town with his family as they attempted to survive the tough years of the Great Depression, and it wasn't long before he began committing petty crimes, stealing livestock and forging checks. Eventually his nefarious activities caught up with him, and he served a year in prison, and after being released in 1940, he met his future wife, Fay Wilson. They soon married and had several children, causing a strain on the household finances. Ray soon resorted to his old ways in an attempt to raise some much-needed cash. His scam involved attending cattle auctions where he would purchase livestock using checks that he knew would bounce, by which time he would have sold the animal for cash. Doing this himself would quickly tarnish his reputation and land him with a long stretch in prison, so he came up with a new scam that would place the blame elsewhere. He began picking up hobos and drifters, employing them as farmhands, and then taking them to cattle auctions, where they would act as the purchaser for the livestock. He would instruct the men to use his checks, which he knew would bounce, to purchase the cattle, which he would then sell for cash. By the time the police caught up with him, the drifter would have moved on to a new town, and Ray could claim that the checks were stolen and the signatures forged, shifting all the blame onto the now virtually untraceable drifter. The scam worked for a while. However, the police soon caught up with Copeland, and he went to jail once again. Upon release, he decided to modify the scam to remove any chance of being connected with the crime. Instead of having the drifter use one of his checks, they were instructed to open their own empty account and write their own checks to purchase the cattle, which Copeland would then reimburse them for. However, upon returning from the auction, instead of receiving money to put into their account, they received a rifle shot to the back of the head. This would ensure that no connection could be made between the fraudulent purchase and Ray. By the time the checks would bounce, the cattle had been sold for cash, and the drifter had been killed and buried. The Copeland's crime soon came to light though, when one of their temporary farmhands fled after Ray attempted to kill him and alerted the police. A search warrant was obtained, and eventually the remains of 5 men were found buried nearby. The couple were soon arrested, but Faye denied any involvement in the murders. In a bizarre twist to the tale, a quilt made from the clothing of the dead men was discovered which Faye had stitched together herself, along with a list of all the farmhands who had worked for the Copelands, with an ominous X marked against 12 of the names, including the 5 dead men. These findings incriminated Faye and led police to suspect that as many as 12 men may have been killed, although the remains of the other 7 missing men were never found. The couple were convicted and sent to death, yet both would escape execution, as Ray died of natural causes in 1993 while on death row, and Faye was eventually released on parole by the state governor, before dying of natural causes in 2003. Number 2. Henry Lucas and Otis Toole. One of America's most prolific and unusual killer couples, the crimes of Henry Lucas and Otis Toole remain shrouded in mystery, with the couple having at some point in their lives confessed to hundreds of murders. Yet Toole was only ever confirmed responsible for 6 murders, while Lucas was confirmed responsible for 11. The true number of victims is likely to remain unknown, as authorities now believe that the couple's huge number of confessions were in fact false, either made under duress by police, keen to close unsolved murder cases, or simply given in the hope of gaining favourable treatment inside prison. Otis Toole came from an abusive and troubled background. His alcoholic father abandoned the family at an early age, and he was the victim of assault carried out by relatives and close acquaintances. He would even later claim that his mother forced him to dress as a girl and call himself Susan, and that his grandmother was a Satanist who involved him in her rituals, which involved self-mutilation and grave robbing, where he was given the moniker of the Devil's Child. He was designated as suffering from mild mental retardation and scored an IQ of just 75. He soon ran away from home and became fascinated with fire, getting into trouble for several acts of arson. It was in 1976 that Otis Toole encountered Henry Lucas in a soup kitchen, and the two began a relationship. Lucas was also from a troubled background, the son of an alcoholic father and prostitute mother whom he claims forced him to watch her while she worked. While in 6th grade, he dropped out of school and ran away from home, becoming a drifter, burglar, and according to his later confessions, a murderer. After 4 years spent in prison on burglary charges, Lucas killed his own mother during an argument, stabbing her in the neck. He served 10 years in prison, before shortly after being released, getting another 5 years for trying to kidnap 3 schoolgirls. It was not long after this that Henry Lucas met Otis Toole, and the psychologically disturbed couple embarked upon their killing spree. Their murders followed no set pattern, stabbing, shooting, or strangling their victims, seemingly at random as they cut a bloody path across the country. The huge number of murder confessions the pair made makes establishing just which killings they were responsible for nearly impossible. Bizarrely, Toole even claimed to have jointly killed 108 people with Lucas, commanded by a cult they refer to as the Hands of Death. Police would later discount the existence of this cult, but like so much in this unusual case, the facts remain hazy. The couple's murder spree finally came to an end in 1983 when Toole was arrested for arson and sentenced to 20 years in prison. While in custody, he confessed to killing 64-year-old George Sonnenberg by locking him in a boarding house and setting the house on fire after the two had had an argument. 2 months later, Lucas was also captured, initially arrested for unlawful possession of a firearm. However, like Toole, he too began boasting of his murderous deeds while in custody. It was then that the dam broke, and a flood of murder confessions flowed from the mouths of the evil pair, and although many were skeptical about the claims due to the sheer number, police later revealed that the men often gave details regarding unsolved murder cases which only the killer could have known. Both men were given the death penalty, however their sentences would be commuted to life in prison, where they both eventually died of natural causes. Number 1. Fred and Rose West. The address of 25 Cromwell Street became known to the British public as the House of Horrors due to the terrible series of abuses and murders that were committed within its walls by Fred and Rose West between 1972 and 1994, yet the couple's crimes date even further back than this. Fred West came from a poor family of farm workers, the son of a strict disciplinarian and something of a mummy's boy. From an early age he was in trouble with the law for petty theft and performed poorly at school, earning a reputation as dim-witted and scruffy. At the age of 17 he suffered a motorbike accident which fractured his skull, and after this was known to become prone to sudden fits of rage. A clue as to the monster he was to become was revealed in 1961 when he was arrested for molesting his 13-year-old sister and getting her pregnant. However, the trial collapsed after she refused to give evidence against him. He went on to marry Rena Costello, who already had a daughter from a previous relationship named Charmaine, and Rena later bore Fred his first child, Anna Marie. She soon left Fred after suffering horrendous abuses at his hands, but made the fatal mistake of leaving her 2 children, Charmaine and Anna Marie, under Fred's care. It was not long after this that Fred met Rose, his future wife. She was only 15 at the time, and it was later revealed that her mother was given electroconvulsive therapy while pregnant with Rose, a treatment that some have theorized may have caused injuries to the unborn Rose, possibly affecting her future behavior. Rose's father was a violent and paranoid schizophrenic, and she suffered frequent abuses at his hands. From the outset, the couple's relationship was sickening and soon became murderous. While Fred was serving a stint in prison, Rose is believed to have murdered Charmaine, his stepdaughter from the previous marriage, and stored her body in the coal cellar until Fred could bury her in the backyard upon release from prison. Charmaine's mother, Rena Costello, would later confront Fred over the girl's whereabouts. However, this would be the last time Rena would be seen alive, as Fred strangled her, dismembered her body, and buried her in a nearby field. Shortly after this, the Wests moved into the infamous house at 25 Cromwell Street, where they began taking in several lodgers to pay the bills. It was during this time that Rose also began working as a prostitute, and by 1983, she would have given birth to a total of 8 children, at least 3 of whom were fathered by clients or lodgers. Life for the Wests' large family was unimaginable, subjected to frequent violent and sexual abuses. In fact, the abuse was so bad that between 1972 and 1992, the children were admitted to hospital on 31 separate occasions. The twisted couple's first joint murder is believed to have been 19-year-old Linda Goff, who became a lodger at the house and soon went missing. Her bound remains would later be found buried beneath the garage, and over the coming years at least 8 more victims would be murdered and buried within the grounds of 25 Cromwell Street, with many being laid to rest in the basement, which would later be concreted over and converted into a bedroom for one of the children. The victims tended to be young girls, who would often be abducted or lured into the house by the couple under false pretenses, and among the victims was their first daughter together, Heather West. The victims would be subjected to unthinkable abuses before being killed and buried. Working alone, it's unlikely that such a terrible series of events could have been kept secret, but as a team the Wests were able to conceal their crimes until 1994, when police finally obtained a search warrant during the investigation into Heather West's disappearance, resulting in the remains of their victims finally being discovered. A total of 9 bodies were found buried at 25 Cromwell Street, with the evil couple ultimately responsible for at least 12 murders between them. However, the true number is likely to be much higher. Fred West would eventually commit suicide in January 1995 while on remand in prison, and Rose would be found guilty of 10 murders, 9 committed with her husband, and 1 on her own, the killing of Fred's stepdaughter Charmaine. She's still alive and in prison today, serving life without possibility of parole, and is due to remain behind bars until she dies. The couple's former home, 25 Cromwell Street, has since been demolished, and the site of so much suffering is now a landscaped footpath. So those are my choices for 5 of the most evil couples of all time. Let me know who else you would have included in the list in the comments below, and I'll see you again on the next video.